This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today it's Tuesday. It's August 13th, 2024. I'm traveling. I'll be traveling for a while until the election, working on this voter election fraud. We've got some big breakthroughs with these algorithms. Our 501c3, which is gods5stones.com. That's G-O-D, no apostrophe, G-O-D-S, gods, spelled out the number F-I-V-E, S-T-O-N-E-S, gods5stones.com. Of course, that comes from the David and Goliath story about David picking up 5 smooth stones from the brook to go after Goliath, which were just the right stones. And we are going to have just the right stones here to make sure that the Democrats do not pull off their planned election fraud. And we're not accusing them of anything, but we want to know why these algorithms are there. We're going to be doing a lot of investigation on it, a lot of podcasting on it, so look forward to this coming. Please go to gods5stones.com. Chris, you can scroll down and you'll see, in fact, you can donate. Also today, it's the first day of publication of my new book, The Anti-Globalist Manifesto, Ending the War on Humanity. There's a war room book with Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, of course, is in prison with these corrupt Democrats who hate God, hate babies, hate life. These demons need to go back to hell where they came from. And I'm intent on sending them back there. This book shows you that we've got to get the Klaus Schwabs of the world who think that they need to depopulate. Well, Satan forgot to tell us that we're the ones being depopulated, and we're not in favor of it. I'll be much more on this book. We're creating the Anti-Globalist Alliance in the United States and in Europe. It's going to be a major institution, and we're just in the first stages of creating it. Okay, today we have a guest with us. We have Mike McCormick back. Mike, let's show Mike and show his book. We've got this is a great book. Mike was the stenographer at the White House for many, many years, which for many years he was in official capacity. In other words, he was staff. And what he did, his job was to, for many years, with Vice President Biden, follow Biden around and make an official record of whatever official duties or speeches, meetings, anything that need to be recorded word for word. Mike was
specifically with the press, just with the press. So
press
interviews, speeches, background interviews, and also with his staff. So his press staff back in that rear of Air Force 2, that's who I would listen to, record and make an official transcript. Sometimes the transcripts were publicly released, but sometimes they were held back just for use by his staff to see his thinking on topics. So it was I heard a lot of Joe Biden's thinking over those 6 years.
And you flew in Air Force 2 with the press.
Correct. Yeah.
And you were not part of the press. Many of those years, Mike, you were actually hired by the government, right? You were a government employee.
Right. For several years, we were contractors, a court reporting contract. And then we became federalized in 2014. Obama wanted our office to be federal employees, which I didn't like, but it became federal employees. And I worked 1 year for Vice President Pence in Donald Trump's administration. I also worked several years for President George Bush and Vice President Cheney. So I had a survey of different styles of being a vice president and wrote the book, The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden, because he's a criminal. He's the one I saw who was a criminal. And it was only after I got access to the Hunter Biden laptop through my friends at Marco Polo that I realized how evil he was and what he's done in concert with his operatives and with other international entities to ruin the world. They took over the world with a fake pandemic and a fake election, and we've got to fight them off.
By the way, Marco Polo, your reference, Chris, if you'll find that website, there is a Marco Polo website. I worked with the Marco Polo guys myself. They did a color book. It's about 500 pages long. It's a big book, kind of like coffee-sized tables, paperback, of the Hunter Biden laptop, and they show pictures from the laptop. They have verbal descriptions of what went on. You can read it. I mean, it's really pretty extensive material on the laptop. And this is it. I don't know if we have it on our website, on the True Central website, but right now, Chris is showing it to you from an article. It's Marco Polo publishes a.
Yes, we do, Dr. Corsi. You can actually search Marco Polo on the upper right-hand corner search bar on the True Central website. Get the article, which is on our website, and you will have, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in on you, but you want.
Oh, that's complete. Go ahead.
I see. I jumped in on you on your own, but there's a link here on this in this article to the actual.
Can you click that link and go to the website? I mean, I want
here. Yeah, so you can get it right on the truecentral.com. Make it simple.
And can you still get that report? Do they still send it out? I don't. I think they do. Maybe online you have to download it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, or just read it right from the website. You just click on it. You just read it right from the air, and
Yeah,
you
it's
can
got
download it.
all kinds of stuff in here about the website and
Right.
about the laptop. I mean, it's Mike. This is what opens your eyes, right?
Right. I mean, they gave me a physical copy of the actual Hunter Biden laptop. So I have a copy. And then they, as they were writing this report, I was looking into the laptop, and I stayed away from the sex pictures, the, selfie porn stuff, and just focused on the emails because because I travel with Biden, I could look at the time frames. So I would go into the laptop and look at emails, say, for instance, from April 2014, and see, wait a minute, he's doing this with Ukraine. That's just before we traveled to Ukraine. And there's emails where he's meeting with Hunter about Burisma. So that's the crimes that I found. It's a conspiracy. And it includes Barack Obama. It includes Jake Sullivan. It includes a lot of people. And
Jake Sullivan is Department of State. He's one of these guys who has been around for a long time. And he is solidly for putting Ukraine in NATO. He hates Russia. He wants war with Russia. This guy is about as evil as they get.
Yeah.
And he is constantly selling out America because he is a globalist. He's another one of these that doesn't believe in the United States of America, like Victoria Nuland. And he's really powerful in our State Department.
Yeah. Right? And he's moved on to, he's our national security advisor. So he's the guy who tells Biden, what to think about. And we know how compromised Biden is. So people like Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, the operatives behind the scenes, they've been running the show. This is what's so disturbing about the past year is how much influence they've had. Joe Biden can sort of sit there and hold it together in a meeting with people. But as we saw in the debate he had with President Trump, he's not cognitive. And so, he probably gets guided into a lot of decisions by people like Jake Sullivan, by people like Tony Blinken.
And they make decisions and they don't even tell him what they're doing. I mean, they put it under his name. Comes in, he signs a piece of paper. And this is this official policy because he signed the paper.
That's right.
He was not mentally there. I think it was a disgrace. But of course, Obama's idea of running the government for his third term. I mean, I continue to maintain Obama would like to have, weekend with Bernie, get a dead guy with AI, and Obama could be behind the scenes doing whatever he wants.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they pretty much are. And there's a lot of crossover people. Ron Klain was in there for a while. It seems like Anita Dunn has just left. So they're going to the Kamala operation, Kamala Harris's, nascent campaign now, and kind of leaving the Biden operation behind. They're leaving the sinking ship and they're hitting the lifeboats. I don't think she's the place to go, but that's all they have, and they're in desperate straits right now.
I want to review. We're going to focus today on Catholic Church again because I'm very close. I worked with Archbishop Vigano in Rome. Has written a introduction to my book on JFK, on the killing of JFK, and Robert Kennedy has a copy of that. He's Catholic, as I was raised Catholic. I mean, this current Pope, I'm loath to say, I think Archbishop is correct when he says, that it's the Pope who is the heretic and schematic. He's the guy who's created the schism, right? Traditional Catholic theology. And I have nothing to. Bergoglio has been a deep disappointment. This is Archbishop Vigano in Rome. working very closely to create the Anti-Globalist Alliance, which he called for the creation of about 3 years ago, and we're now doing it. He's not a direct part of it. He'll be spiritual. He has to remain independent, and Archbishop Vigano will remain independent. He's his own man, his own thinking. He's now excommunicated. I think he's more of the Catholic Church than the Pope is. At any rate, let's go. The issue I want to face on today is this guy named McCarrick, who is Archbishop of Washington, D.C., and he was a known homosexual and pedophile. I mean, this guy looks like Satan himself. He was cardinal, and he had sex with seminarians. That was his big deal. He loved the seminarians, have sex with the boys. But he also had sex with the altar boys. He's a raging homosexual pedophile, elevated to cardinal in the Catholic Church and made the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. during the Obama administration. Now he
was made Archbishop of Washington, D.C. in 2000 by Pope John Paul, and then in 2001 he was elevated to cardinal. So he remained in charge of the Archdiocese of D.C. as a cardinal until 2006, I believe, when he was replaced by Cardinal Wuerl. He had to retire officially, that was a rule of the Vatican, at age 75. So that was right around 2006.
Okay. And this guy McCarrick is evil. I mean, his goal is to transform the Catholic Church into an LGBT institution. Here he is, his pontifical robes. I mean, he's not pontifical, but that means Pope, but these are his clerical robes, celebrating Easter here. And here he is with Pope Francis in the Vatican. And both these guys are just evil. They want to take the Catholic Church from its traditional roots and to say that it's now with this synodal process. The synods are meetings of the bishops with the clergy. It started in Germany, and the idea is to bring in the marginalized minorities and give them voice in the Catholic Church, which means normalize and celebrate the LGBT and normalize their sexual behavior and have this be the new Catholic theology of sex isn't for procreation, sex is for any perversion you can think of. The Catholic Church wants to stay for that. Catholic Church has gone to hell. And this fulfills Pope Leo XIII's prediction that Satan would eventually be in control of the Vatican. And it appears to me that's now what has happened. Now, I want to the purpose here with Mike is to drill down on this because McCarrick played a pivotal role going between the Obama administration and Joe Biden as vice president. Remember, Joe Biden is Catholic. Joe Biden is Catholic, but he supports abortion. And so therefore, there's a large problem with the Democrats who are Catholic, of whom there's a great number, because they support killing babies in the womb right up to birth and sometimes even after they're born. And this is clearly a violation of God's ability to bestow life and to have life be regarded as sacred, not destroyed at the whim of a mother who finds a pregnancy inconvenient. Now, what the church is using is this issue in order to open the door to the whole LGBT, because again, LGBT is not procreation. Two men having sex aren't going to create a baby. I'm sorry. Two women having sex aren't going to create a baby. It's just not going to happen. Okay, that's not the way God created it. As much as they want to put, menstrual pads in men's bathrooms, these people are insane. That's ridiculous. It's a joke. Okay, but it's a satanic joke. Now, the whole point is that McCarrick supported pedophilia, he supported LGBT, and he was willing to work with criminal drug dealers in Honduras. He's willing to work with the regime in China to undermine the Catholic Church. And we're going to explore here whether or not, in fact Archbishop Vigano's caught onto it. The Podesta email suggests that there may have been a Vatican spring in which the ouster of Pope Benedict XVI was architected by the same people in our State Department same Soros group of criminals who was overthrowing governments in northern Africa during the Arab Spring, including Ukraine and its Orange Revolution, which preceded the Maidan Revolution, in which we deposed legitimate rulers in Ukraine because they were Russian-oriented. Now, McCarrick played a role here in all these transformations, and Mike's got the inside on it. So, Mike, let's start out by what was McCarrick's access to the White House during the Obama years?
Well, so McCarrick was a prominent cardinal in Washington with politicians, Irish Catholic. Every time they had a St. Patrick's Day celebration, there's Cardinal McCarrick, representing the Irish Catholic clergy kind of side of the celebration. Also, they'd have a prayer breakfast, and he was there. So he was prominent, and he was very prominent with the Bush administration after 9/11. He came out and did a lot of sort of healing ceremonies in 2001, around 2002. So shortly after that, that's when the Bush administration said, we think McCarrick would be good to go to China. So in the Bush administration, he started getting this assignment to go to China and Iran. And then as that progressed, as the Bush administration gave way to the Obama administration, they brought in, there were a lot of Catholics in the Obama administration. Joe Biden was a Catholic, prominent Catholic. He was friends of McCarrick during the 2000s at these prayer breakfasts, at these Senate and House St. Patrick's Day celebrations. And he'd have, as he was vice president from the beginning, he'd have McCarrick invited over to the national, his vice president's residence, the Naval Observatory, to be a part of the celebration and have meetings with him. Well, that became something that was more than just social. Behind the scenes, Joe Biden had Catholic people advising him. One of his top advisors was a guy named Tom Donilon. Tom Donilon was a graduate of Catholic University. McCarrick got a master's and a PhD from Catholic University in the 60s. And he went up through the ranks. And one of the things that he learned at Catholic University, a job that he wound up with there, was being fundraiser. He was in charge of their fundraising. And so that was his magic potion that he used.
He was able to raise a lot of money.
He raised a lot of money for the church over the years. He did that in New York, and he became the golden boy. That's how he moved up in the archbishop.
He dispensed that money broadly across the church.
And he'd spread it around to other bishops and all kinds of people. So and he was doing that as a cardinal in 2001.
He became like a godfather. He became like the guy who could collect money.
Very much. And he was also very popular with Catholic journalists. Tim Russert of Meet the Press, very prominent NBC News journalist. He ran their election desks for years. Well, he had McCarrick very, very close. There was an eruption of, in the mid 2000s, the Catholic Church was, there was these huge reporting on the pedophile activities of all these priests. And there was, it became a public outcry. And so there's a famous Meet the Press episode where McCarrick goes on and basically lies right to Tim Russert. At the time, McCarrick knew that he was one of the pedophiles that was behind all this. And he, said, well, there's a special place in hell. Russert asked him, there's got to be a special place in hell for these people. And McCarrick agreed. And he was the guy who was doing it. So eventually the truth comes out about McCarrick being a pedophile. It took another 14 years before that happened. I think that episode between those two was 2004. It took until 2018 where the Vatican really acknowledged all the sins that McCarrick had done over the years. In doing that acknowledgement in 2018, they had to acknowledge all the covering up they'd done. They knew McCarrick was a pedophile dating back to his priest and bishop years when he was an archbishop in New Jersey. He would invite, he had the diocese buy a beachside house, a beachfront house. And he'd invite seminarians down there. There'd be a number of beds, and there'd always be one less bed that was needed. And he'd wound up inviting one of the guys into his bed. And that's where he committed these heinous acts. And it was, this is a superior. These are kids, these are young men who want to move up in the church, become priests. They're not yet priests. And they're there with this bishop, and all of a sudden they've got to spend the night with him in the same bed. That's borderline, there's a
coercion.
There's a man on man
Yeah.
sexual deviancy there. That's rape. That's a rape situation. But there's also, these are young priests, and he's basically raping the church as he's raping these young priests. He's raping them out of their chastity vows. He's raping them out of their future, really. He's putting them in under the control of evil. And so this is a terrible scourge that he did. And
I was out there for a minute, Mike.
Yeah.
The part of the whole crime here is blackmail. Okay?
Right.
So once these people are compromised, then they're owned. So as soon as you get a seminarian who comes in, he sleeps with McCarrick, and they have homosexual sex, then and God only knows what they do. Then they're owned because they've been compromised, and that can be recorded, that can be disclosed. They can ruin their careers in the church. I want to cover one more thing. Talk about the evolution of this Catholic scandal in the priesthood. First of all, this probably goes back centuries. But the problem is that, in the 1950s, post-war generation, the baby boomers, of which I'm a member, there was a lot of access in Catholic schools to the boys, to the priests, because the big push was to be an altar boy. Okay, in a Catholic school, they wanted you to be an altar boy. Well, I was never an altar boy. That was not my deal.
I was an altar boy.
I think almost all these guys were. Most men and young kids came up as altar boys. It was part of the access to the priest. When you had a Catholic school and a diocese, the Catholic school. I went to St. Philomena's Catholic School in East Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, I went to St. Dominic's in Shaker Heights.
Okay, well, so there you are. So the St. Philomena's was a middle class. At that time, I grew up in East Cleveland. I was born on Ardnall Avenue in East Cleveland, Shaw and Hayden, by Shaw High School. My mother went to Shaw High School. Okay, Chambers School was there. That's where I started a grade school. It was a block away. It was a middle-class neighborhood. We lived in a two-family house. My grandparents owned the house. We lived upstairs. My sister was born when I was 14 years old. I moved up into the attic and slept up in the attic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the church was a big deal. Every Sunday, everybody'd pack into the car and we'd go to mass.
Right.
Come home and have breakfast. It was a big ritual on Sundays. Then watch football games and baseball, watch the Browns play. And, that was Sunday. And at the school, which had a parochial school, St. Philomena's grade school, you go to St. Philomena's grade school, and through the nuns taught there. They were the Ursuline nuns. They had their convent. Priests had the priest's house. They're all in the same compound, which the church owned all this property with a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that was typical throughout Cleveland. At most middle-class American cities, post-war era, that was typical. And the priests then would establish relationships. They'd come over. They'd come into the classrooms. They were a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The nuns were always catering to the priests. And the priests would be paying attention then to the kids. And the priest might say, let's go play baseball. We'll go play catch or something. And then why don't you become an altar boy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now for the older priests, mostly, what happened is a lot of these priests were pedophiles, and they used the special relationship they had with boys for sex.
Mm.
And the boys are completely, the boys think this is a priest.
Right.
Trusted, this is my spiritual guide. And the kids don't even understand what sex is to begin with. And then they're confused and they're compromised. They don't tell the parents. It becomes a psychological disorder.
Right.
They may never recover from. Okay, now through the 50s, this went on, and it was buried largely. The Boston Globe did a big revelation on this. I don't remember the exact years, but they caught on to it in Boston. There was a movie done about it.
Yeah, that was right around 2004. That's what they were talking. That's what Tim Russert talked to McCarrick on, that Boston Globe.
Movie.
And the movie was Spotlight.
Spotlight, yes. It was a very good movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like in the tradition of, All the President's Men. They were searching out something and they were knocking on doors and trying to hunt it down. And the Boston Globe in those years was a good newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And it still did honest reporting, which it doesn't do today. But the point is, they reported on this, and it was a scandal because most Catholics couldn't believe it.
Right.
It just was impossible to imagine that the priests had done something this horrible, and that we let our kids or our parents let us be exposed to this. Now, as the scandal developed, the first reaction of the Catholic Church was to deny it. Not happening. And there was a big pushback, and McCarrick was part of that pushback.
Right.
Meanwhile, the seminaries were turning into homosexual institutions. If you didn't buy into the homosexuality, you didn't become a priest. And the homosexuality at the Vatican was dominant and protected and secret. Also,
Right.
a secret society. Now, Mike, is anything I've said here wrong? Elaborate on it.
No, but here's the question I have about McCarrick. So McCarrick came up through Catholic University in the 60s. I grew up in the DC area. After leaving Cleveland in 1973, we moved here to Potomac, Maryland. I grew up surrounded by kids whose parents worked in the CIA or the intelligence community. And there were congressmen and kids like that. And their kids were in our high school, public school. So what I learned was there's a lot of Catholics that go into the CIA. And it has a nickname, the Catholic Intelligence Agency. They did a lot of recruiting out of Catholic colleges, like Catholic University, like Notre Dame, like Georgetown University. And personally, I think that McCarrick was recruited to be an asset. They realized that he had a fondness for sex with men. They saw that as something that was attractive for intelligence operative. And I think, frankly, he was working for the CIA more than he was working for the church. And so I'm writing a book on it now. My question throughout the book is, who was he working for? And now we can take that question up to the top of the church and say, who was Pope Francis working for? Who was Bergoglio working for? Because it's clear that from what I've seen and understand from how McCarrick was moved up through the ranks. In the 90s, he became, as an archbishop out of New Jersey, he became prominent in State Department programs, traveling internationally. He traveled to China over 9 times between 1990 and 2017. And he did that for not only the Vatican, but also the State Department. And so why was he doing that? Who was his boss? The Vatican, they did after he was caught with this red-handed in 2018. And basically the way he was caught is kind of suspicious. Trump comes into the presidency in 2017. 6 months after he's president, in June of 2017, a young man who was a teenage altar boy in the 70s, comes out with a credible accusation that this guy, McCarrick, molested me when I was a teenager. Well, since he was an underage person, they took it to the diocese, took it to the police. And the police said, you know what? He's this happened so many years ago, we're not going to pursue it. But then, uncharacteristically, the diocese kicked it up to the Vatican. And uncharacteristically, the Vatican started looking at it. And I think they realized at this point in time, with Trump in office and going through the intelligence community the way he was, they had to start pulling back on operatives. They had to silence operatives who were out there, like McCarrick. And so they silenced him. All of a sudden, they came out with this accusation. He was under investigation. He was under investigation for a year until June 2018. He still did some travel for the Pope. He still had meetings with the Pope in Rome, and then went to China. He was working on the Vatican outreach to the Chinese Catholics, which was actually the Vatican outreach to the Chinese Communist Party that became a disaster for the Chinese Catholics. And so he continued working on that until 2018. And then they said, you know what, we've done this investigation. He's guilty. We want him to resign from we need to have him stop all activities for the church. He resigned from the College of Cardinals in June of 2018. He did some protests. By January 2019, all his protests were done. And Pope Francis finally at that point in time said, yes, I accept this fact that this man was, he's no longer, I accept all the findings against him. He's no longer a cardinal in the church. He was defrocked, delaicized.
Okay, let's
no more powers. So it took all that time. It took all that time, and basically they had silenced this guy. Ever since then, he's had no exposure to the public.
Who's they? Who silenced him?
The church, the Vatican, silenced him by pulling him back from public discourse.
The Vatican decided that he was no longer a useful asset.
Right.
If the Vatican decided that, what did the CIA decide?
Well, that's the question. Who decided it? And who told whom to do what? Yeah, I think it was the CIA telling Vatican, look, you guys got to pull this guy in. That's what I think.
Or the CIA saying, look, we're too exposed here. We've gone too far out with Obama. We got Trump in here now.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
The pedophile scheme, we can't contain it any longer. Okay. So this is now, and Trump is on top of this.
Right. And so you're talking about, Archbishop Vigano. Archbishop Vigano confronted McCarrick several times over the course of his pedophile cover-up.
Okay, let's get for a minute. Archbishop Vigano was at this time papal nuncio to the United States. Okay,
right.
Papal nuncio means he was the highest-ranking representative of the Pope in the United States, and as such, he had meetings back in Rome, in which McCarrick attended. Now, Vigano documents and several things he's written that there were times when he had opportunity to speak to McCarrick one-on-one.
Right.
He confronted McCarrick about this homosexuality issue directly. So, Mike, elaborate on that.
So, Archbishop Vigano was I believe in 2006, before he was the nuncio, he started to get wise to this McCarrick thing. And he started telling superiors in the Vatican, this McCarrick guy is bad. There's something going on there. And they didn't listen to him. So eventually he became the nuncio. And this was during Benedict's time. So Benedict eventually moves Vigano to be the nuncio. And I believe he had to do that here in the States. I don't think he was doing that out of Rome.
Well, so, let's even get more detailed down, more granular. First of all, Benedict is a Jesuit, right? Benedict Jesuit? I'm not sure.
Bergoglio's a Jesuit. Bergoglio's the Jesuit.
Benedict is traditionalist, much more so. When you read Benedict, his theology is traditional Catholic theology by and large. I mean, he still supported Vatican II more than I'm comfortable with, Pope Benedict XVI. But he was not in favor of the homosexuality. Okay?
Right.
That's the major issue here. Now, that became confrontative during the Obama years because the Obama's gay. Obama's raging gay.
Right.
Probably bisexual, but raging gay. Okay, and that's been Obama. When they said
secretly.
When they said Obama back when he was at Punahou, they said he played basketball and he was a bomber because he liked to throw shots from way out. No, he was a bomber because he was stoned homosexual. Okay, running around with a stoned homosexual group in Hawaii. These marginal kids going to Punahou, some of whom are now in prison. Okay, now Obama comes from this subculture, which is quiet. He's lying about it. And he's lying about almost everything about its entire being. Okay, and so that's a secret that he's promoting
Right.
His objective is to normalize, if not to celebrate, the LGBT community, to bring it into, and our State Department, which, by the way, the State Department and the CIA recruit very heavily from Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been together in this kind of secret bond, in this, what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. It's been Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA, and his brother John Foster Dulles, who was head of the State Department during Eisenhower. These two organizations were sister organizations.
Mm-hmm.
One in charge of diplomacy, the other in charge of espionage. Okay, and so they worked together. Now, the Catholic element here, when Obama comes on, is being dominated and permeated by this LGBT underculture. Majority Catholics are not LGBT. Majority Catholics are straight. Okay, the kids being abused by the priests is appalling once they find out. It's denied. Now, Obama comes on, and it's becoming increasingly known. But this is 2004. Obama comes on in 2004. Boston Globe does its exposés in this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
No one yet believes it. It isn't until Obama's on the way out that McCarrick becomes a problem for the CIA, the Department of State, and the Church.
Right.
And now the Church, CIA, and the State Department decide this guy McCarrick's got to go. Now, they don't excommunicate him.
Right.
They say he's now no longer a cardinal. So he's still a member of the Church in good standing. He's just what they call laicized. He's made part of the laity. Okay, and this is an important distinction because he's still allowed to have access to the sacraments of the Catholic Church, even though he's a disgraced homosexual, pedophile.
Right.
Okay, and when Francis comes after they depose, and we're saying that the revolution against Benedict XVI was a coup d'etat.
Right.
Again, orchestrated by the CIA and the State Department. That's what we're
and Obama operatives.
And Obama operatives together.
And the primary Obama operative who was behind the scenes all this is a Catholic guy named Dennis McDonough. Now,
okay. Also, don't rule out Anita Dunn.
Okay, I haven't run across her.
Anita Dunn
I know a lot about Dennis McDonough.
Okay, Anita Dunn was also involved in this, and she was the Perkins Coie tie. And she was one of the big people from Obama from the very beginning, because Anita Dunn and her husband were the two primary ones to cover up the birth certificate, the fact that Obama does not have a birth certificate. Now, by the way, I know that to be a fact, because I found the birth certificate from Obama that was the one from which it was copied, and that's been verified by Sheriff Arpaio, by forensic. This is Anita Dunn. Now, she is a complete communist. She's a total commie, hates America, wants to go LGBT, and it's been prominent in the Obama administration from the very beginning. A secret operative, and shows up. Oh, that's her husband. That's the two of them when they were younger. It's when they first came in. I forget his name right now, but I wrote about him, I believe, in Obama Nation. I certainly wrote a lot about the two of them in the birth certificate book. Okay, now these two are also involved with McCarrick, with Donnellan, with the Obama coup, which is focused on destroying the Catholic Church, bringing Satan into the Catholic Church, bringing LGBT in the Catholic Church, and bringing Bergoglio, who is Argentinian, into the Pope, in the role as Pope, with Benedict XVI retiring, which is really a pretty, not entirely unprecedented, but remarkable within the Catholic Church. Now, Mike, we're going to run out of time here. I want to this is going to be a continuing discussion. When's your next availability?
I can be on probably next week, actually. I'm pretty busy these days. I got a big project out of town.
Okay, we're going to kind of wrap this up right here because we've kind of covered a large block of time. And we're going to pick it up again when you're available next.
Good.
It's going to be a continuing series of discussions because we're going to flesh this issue out entirely. Okay, now, in sum up here, Chris, would you show Mike's book again, please, and on the screen? I want people to see this. This is the case to impeach and imprison Joe Biden. It's published by Post Hill Press. By the way, I just became appointed an acquisitions editor for Post Hill Press. I can now
Yeah.
acquire books.
Great.
And
And so real quick about the book, this has a lot of information in here about Joe Biden's crimes in Ukraine, but there's another part of it that figures into the Vatican situation that we're talking about, and we'll talk about in the future. And that's what Joe Biden did in Honduras and with this whole southern border surrender to the cartels through something called the Alliance for Prosperity. And the Vatican was involved in that.
and Mike gets into that at the end of the book. The last few chapters really get into this.
Right.
You know, the beginning of the book has it's a very interesting read, and I really encourage people to read it because it starts out with Mike kind of innocent about all this. He's a stenographer. He's traveling with the press. He's, this is the vice president. He's, traditional American. These guys have got to be good. And then he starts finding out that they're not so good.
Right.
And it's an awakening.
Yeah, it really is.
Book is
and then the next book is going to be the awakening into what happened in the Vatican. Really dark. And
we're going to cover all this extensively. But we're going to wrap up today, Mike. And Christopher, you'll show also the new book that I've got out today, which is the Anti-Globalist Manifesto. It's out now, and it will be available here. I think it's going to be in the bookstores. It's a Bannon book. Mike, thank you. This is going to be a continuing series of discussions, and we'll ultimately put them all together and run them as a series.
Great.
I think, I want to help you sell this book, and I want people to buy it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Corsi. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Okay. It's Dr. Jerome Corsi, and then God always wins. God's going to win here too. We'll do our part to make sure that happens. And I encourage everybody in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:11 to get down on your knees, pray, repent for letting the world get to this point. God is sovereign. God already won. God did not create this place to lose. We have to do our part, and that's 2 Chronicles 7:11. God will do the rest. God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Dr. Jerome Corsi, this is thetruthcentral.com. We're broadcasting weekdays. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.